Get this dirty black girl away from my table before she brings lice, disease, or whatever slum trash she crawled out of. Charles Whitmore said it with a smile, white teeth gleaming under Edison bulbs. Voice loud enough to carry across the entire rooftop terrace. 9:47 p.m. Friday night. October chill, sitting at 54 degrees. The Sterling Heights rooftop restaurant. Ivy cascading down exposed brick walls. String lights crisscrossing overhead like constellations. 6 patio heaters glowing orange, fighting back the autumn cold. Whitmore sat in his $18,000 carbon fiber wheelchair, custom titanium frame catching the light. Silver hair perfectly styled. Navy suit tailored to perfection. For businessmen flanked his table. Dark suits, power ties, Rolex watches catching firelight. White tablecloth. Crystal champagne flutes. Herb-crusted lamb, chops, cooling on bone china. And standing 3 feet from their table, barefoot on cold stone tile, was Amara Jackson. 10 years old. Torn jeans with holes at both knees. Oversized gray jacket 2 sizes too big. Sleeves hanging past her fingertips. Arms crossed tight across her chest. Chin lifted. Eyes locked on Whitmore. Black skin. Alone. Surrounded by a sea of white faces turning to stare. The nearest businessman, silver cufflinks, bourbon in hand, leaned back laughing. Charles, you can't just say that anymore. Why not? Whitmore spread his hands wide, grinning. I own 3 buildings on this block. I can say whatever I want on my rooftop. More nervous laughter rippled around the table. A woman in pearls 2 tables over looked away quickly. A waiter froze mid-pour, champagne bottle hovering. Amara didn't move, didn't blink. Her voice came out steady, clear, cutting through the laughter like glass. Sir, I can heal your legs. The laughter stopped. Whitmore's smile widened into something cruel. What did you just say to me, girl? Your legs? Amara's hands trembled, but her voice didn't. The journal said it works in seconds. I can heal you. Right now. Silence spread like water across the rooftop. 50 diners watching now. Forks suspended. Conversations dying mid-sentence. One of the businessmen, thick neck, gold rings, leaned forward. Someone call security. This kid's disturbed. No. Whitmore held up one hand, eyes glittering with amusement. Let her finish. This is entertaining. He rolled his wheelchair forward slightly, wheels smooth and silent. You can heal me? In seconds. Yes, sir. And how exactly does this miracle work? Amara's jaw tightened. The journal explained it. There's a pressure point. Behind the knee. A pressure point. Whitmore threw his head back, laughing so hard tears formed at the corners of his eyes. Oh my God. A pressure point. Did you hear that? He looked around at his table, at the watching crowd. This homeless child thinks she can fix 12 years of paralysis with a pressure point she read about in a journal. The businessman with gold rings guffawed. Where do you even find a medical journal, sweetheart? The dumpster? Amara's face stayed stone. The recycling bin. Behind the kitchen. Someone threw out 3 copies. July 2024 issue. Journal of Emergency Medicine. Pages 847 through 851. That landed different. The laughter faltered slightly. One of the businessmen frowned, glancing at Whitmore. But Whitmore just smiled wider. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a checkbook, slapped it on the table with a sharp crack that made Amara flinch. Perfect, he said, voice dripping with theatrical warmth. Then let's make this interesting. He pulled a pen from his breast pocket, clicked it open. I'm going to write you a check right now. $1 million. Gasped from nearby tables. Someone whispered, he's not serious. $1 million, Whitmore repeated, scrawling across the check with bold strokes. If you heal me, if I stand up and walk in your magical seconds, this money is yours. You can crawl out of whatever gutter you're sleeping in. He looked up, smile gone, eyes cold as January. But when you fail, and you will fail, the police are taking you away. Trespassing, harassment, possibly assault if you touch me. He tapped the pen against his wheelchair. Does that sound fair, street rat? The rooftop went silent. Waiting. Amara looked at the check. At the crowd. At the four businessmen smirking behind their champagne glasses. At Charles Whitmore, paralyzed for 12 years, confident in his power, his wealth, his untouchable position at the top of the world. She whispered, "Okay." 1 hour earlier, 8:47 p.m., Amara had followed the smell 9 blocks from Riverside Park. Rosemary, garlic butter, seared meat, food from a universe she'd never entered. October air bit at her bare feet, but 54 degrees wasn't cold enough to die from. Not yet. November would be different. December even worse. The Sterling Heights rose like a fortress of glass and brick. Warm light pouring from every window. String lights visible on the rooftop, 6 stories up. People who'd never been cold, never been hungry, never been invisible. Amara found the service entrance, the dumpster, and beside it, the blue recycling bin where someone had tossed their reading material. 3 water-damaged copies of the Journal of Emergency Medicine. July 2024 issue. Coffee stained. Pages torn. Someone's discarded subscription. She'd read them twice by flashlight under the overpass. Memorized every word of the article on pages 847 to 851. Restoration of motor function through applied pressure therapy. Revolutionary findings in neural pathway reactivation. The journal said seconds. Amara climbed the fire escape. Want to know if a homeless 10-year-old can really heal a paralyzed millionaire? Subscribe now and find out what happens when Amara touches Charles Whitmore's legs, and whether she walks away with $1 million or in handcuffs. Aaliyah Brooks was 10 years old, and she hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. Not since Tuesday morning when the church breakfast program ran out of oatmeal before she reached the front of the line. Wednesday, she found half a bagel in Washington Square Park, cream cheese still wrapped, only slightly warm from sitting in the sun. Yesterday, nothing but tap water from a gas station bathroom and 3 crackers a woman gave her outside the library. Now, it was Friday night, and her stomach had stopped growling hours ago. That's when you knew it was bad, when the hunger went quiet. 9 p.m., October air sitting at 54 degrees. Cold enough to make her toes numb against the sidewalk. Cold enough that her breath came out in small white clouds. Not cold enough to kill. Not yet, but November was coming. Aaliyah pulled the oversized gray jacket tighter, donated, sleeves hanging past her hands, and followed the smell that had called to her from 6 blocks away. Butter, garlic, char-grilled meat, rosemary and black pepper, and something sweet, maybe caramelized onions. Rich food. Food from a different world. The Sterling Heights restaurant rose ahead of her like a castle made of brick and glass. Warm golden light spilled from every window. On the rooftop terrace 6 stories up, she could see string lights glowing like tiny stars, could hear the faint murmur of laughter and music drifting down. People who'd never been cold, never been hungry, never been invisible. Aaliyah wasn't going there for food. She walked past the main entrance, doorman in a burgundy coat, polished brass handles, and slipped down the side alley to the service entrance. Kitchen staff clustered near the door, smoking cigarettes, white aprons stained with grease and sauce. They'd already chased her away twice tonight. First time at 7:30 p.m. when she tried to slip through during a delivery. A line cook with tattooed forearms had grabbed her shoulder, not rough but firm. "You can't be back here, kid. Go on." Second time at 8:15 p.m. when she'd attempted the loading dock. Same cook, less patient. "I told you already. Beat it before I call someone." She left both times. Circled the block. Waited. But she kept coming back. Not for the dumpster. Not for scraps. For what she'd found behind the dumpster, stacked in the blue recycling bin like forgotten treasure. Medical journals. 7 of them, actually. Different months, different years. The Journal of Emergency Medicine. Water damaged, coffee stained, torn covers, folded corners. Someone's expired subscription, tossed out when they moved offices or clean house. Trash to them. Gold to Aaliyah. She'd been reading them by streetlight for the past 40 minutes, sitting on the cold concrete behind a recycling bin where the kitchen staff couldn't see her. Her bare feet had gone numb. Her fingers were stiff. But her mind was on fire. She read fast. Always had. Once was enough. One passed through, and the information stuck like glue, perfect and permanent. Photographic memory. One doctor had called it years ago. Exceptional recall, another said. Eidetic processing. That was before the shelters. Before the foster homes that never lasted more than 6 months. Before her mother died on a gurney in an emergency room hallway because the nurse was too busy, because the doctor didn't listen, because a black woman saying, "I can't breathe," wasn't urgent enough. Aaliyah was 7 when that happened. 3 years later, she could still recite every word the ER doctor had said to the police afterward. By the time we assessed her, the pulmonary embolism was too advanced. There was nothing we could do. He'd been lying. The journal article she'd read 6 months ago, November 2023 issue, pages 1192 through 1197, proved it. Early intervention protocols. Warning signs. A 15-minute window that had been ignored. Aaliyah didn't forget things. And tonight, crouched behind a dumpster with frozen feet and an empty stomach, she found something that made her heart pound so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Journal of Emergency Medicine, July 2024, pages 847 to 851. Restoration of motor function through applied pressure therapy. Revolutionary findings in neural pathway reactivation. The article detailed a breakthrough technique for acute sciatic nerve compression, the kind that caused sudden paralysis, the kind emergency responders encountered in crush injuries, car accidents, falls. Specific pressure points. Precise hand placement. Immediate release of trapped nerve pathways. The results happened in seconds. Not minutes. Not hours. Seconds. One case study showed a patient walking within 30 seconds of treatment after being paralyzed for 6 hours. Another documented full motor function restored in under a minute. Aaliyah read it 3 times, even though once was enough. She memorized the diagrams, the hand positions, the exact location behind the knee where the nerve bundles compressed, the amount of pressure, firm but not crushing, the angle, 45 degrees, posterior to anterior. She could see it perfectly in her mind, could feel how her hands would need to move. And then she looked up at the glowing rooftop terrace and thought, what if I could prove it works? What if she could show them, all of them, everyone who'd ever looked through her like she didn't exist, that she wasn't just some dirty homeless kid? What if she could help someone? Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, soft and warm. Baby, you've got a gift. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small because of where you come from. Your mind is worth more than their money. Aaliyah folded the journal carefully, tucked it inside her jacket against her chest where it wouldn't get wet or lost. Then she climbed the fire escape. 6 flights. Metal stairs a-slick with evening dew. Her bare feet slipped twice, but she caught herself, kept climbing, kept moving toward the light and laughter above. The rooftop terrace opened before her like a dream. String lights everywhere. Ivy cascading down brick walls. Patio heaters glowing orange. White tablecloths and crystal glasses, and people dressed in clothes that cost more than most people's rent. And sitting at the center table, surrounded by men in expensive suits, was a man in a wheelchair. Silver hair. Sharp smile. Confident posture, even sitting down. Charles Whitmore. Aaliyah recognized him from newspaper photos at the library. Real estate developer. Philanthropist. Paralyzed 12 years ago in a skiing accident. Confined to a wheelchair ever since. She took a breath, stepped forward onto the rooftop, walked straight toward his table. And before anyone could stop her, before security could grab her arm, she said the words that would change everything. Sir, I can heal your legs. What happens when a homeless girl with a perfect memory challenges a millionaire who thinks she's trash? Can science really work miracles in seconds? Or is Aaliyah about to lose everything? Subscribe now to see if she walks away with $1 million or in handcuffs. Charles Whitmore laughed so hard he slapped his thigh. The sound cracked across the rooftop like a gunshot, palm against expensive fabric, against dead muscle that hadn't moved in 12 years. His whole body shook with it, tears streaming down his face. The 4 businessmen at his table howling right along with him. A pressure point. Whitmore gasped between laughs. This child, this barefoot little he couldn't even finish. Just kept laughing, head thrown back, mouth wide open. The businessman with gold rings pounded the table, champagne sloshing in glasses. Charles, you're going to give yourself a heart attack. That's when Whitmore's face changed. The laughter stopped mid-breath. His smile froze, then melted like wax. Eyes going wide, mouth falling open, but no sound coming out. His right hand shot to his chest, gripping, clawing at his navy suit jacket. Then a champagne glass slipped from his left hand. It fell in slow motion, or maybe that's just how Aaliyah remembered it later. Crystal tumbling end over end, golden liquid spiraling out in an arc, catching the string lights like liquid fire. The glass hit the stone patio and exploded, shards skittering across tile, champagne spreading in a dark puddle. And Charles Whitmore's leg, his right leg, motionless for 12 years, jerked violently. The foot kicked forward, knee extending, wheelchair rocking backward from the force. A spasm so sudden and sharp that the nearest businessman jumped back, chair scraping stone. Then the leg went completely still, dead weight, hanging an unnatural angle off the edge of the wheelchair. Whitmore's hands flew to the armrests, knuckles white, gripping so hard the carbon fiber creaked. His breath came in short, panicked gasps, eyes darting down to his legs, then up to the faces around him, then back down. I can't, his voice cracked. I can't feel my legs. Silence dropped like a curtain. 50 diners frozen. Forks suspended. Conversations dead. Then chaos erupted. Charles, the businessman with silver cufflinks, lunged forward, knocking over a water glass. Charles, what's happening? Call 911. Someone screamed from a nearby table. Chairs scraped back in a chorus of grinding metal and wood. The woman in pearls stood so fast her napkin fell to the ground. Phones materialized in a dozen hands, screens glowing blue-white in the dim light. I need an ambulance at Sterling Heights, rooftop terrace. Is he having a stroke? Someone get a doctor. The businessman with the thick neck and gold rings grabbed Whitmore's shoulders. Can you move them? Charles, can you move your legs? Whitmore stared down at his body like it belonged to someone else. His face had gone gray, sweat beading on his forehead despite the October chill. I can't feel them. I can't. They were moving and now I can't feel anything. A waiter rushed over with a tablecloth. The maitre d' appeared, speaking rapidly into a radio. Security guards pushed through the crowd, black uniforms and earpieces, hands up trying to create space. Everyone step back. Give him room. Ambulance is 3 minutes out. Does anyone know CPR? He's conscious, you idiot, he's talking. And through it all, Aaliyah stood perfectly still, 3 feet from the table, bare feet on cold stone, arms at her sides, watching. Her voice cut through the panic like a blade. Sir, your sciatic nerve is trapped. Every head turned toward her. She didn't flinch, didn't look away, just kept her eyes locked on Charles Whitmore's terrified face. The spasm compressed it. She continued, voice steady and clear. Behind your right knee, the nerve bundle is pinched between the biceps femoris and the tibial collateral ligament. That's why you can't feel anything. It's cutting off all motor function below the compression point. One of the security guards reached for her arm. Kid, you need to... Don't touch her. Whitmore's voice came out hoarse, shaking. His eyes were locked on Aaliyah now, really seeing her for the first time. What did you just say? Your sciatic nerve, Aaliyah repeated. It's trapped. The journal article documented 43 cases just like this. Acute compression following involuntary muscle spasm in previously paralyzed patients. The nerve pathway tries to reactivate but gets caught in scar tissue. The businessman with silver cufflinks stared at her. How do you? I can fix it. Aaliyah took 1 step forward. Security tensed but didn't grab her. The pressure point I mentioned, it releases the compression. The journal showed full motor function restored in under 60 seconds across all documented cases. She's making this up, the gold rings businessman hissed. Charles, don't listen to... The ambulance will take you to County General, Aaliyah interrupted, still focused on Whitmore. Nearest ER is 2.4 miles away. For minutes in traffic. Another 3 to get you inside. 7 to triage. By then, the nerve damage could be permanent. The article said the window is 10 minutes maximum before ischemic injury becomes irreversible. Whitmore's face had gone from gray to chalk white. His breathing was rapid and shallow. Permanent? Maybe. The data varied. But every case that received treatment after 12 minutes showed lasting deficits. Aaliyah's voice softened slightly. Sir, I know you don't trust me. I know what you think of me. But I also know you felt your leg move for the first time in 12 years. Silence. The woman in pearls had tears on her cheeks. The waiter stood frozen with the tablecloth clutched in white-knuckled hands. Security guards exchanged uncertain glances. And Charles Whitmore stared at this barefoot black girl in a torn jacket who spoke like a doctor and looked like she'd crawled out of a gutter. Then, impossibly, he laughed. Not the nervous laughter from before. Not the cruel, mocking sound that had echoed across the rooftop when she first approached. This was different, darker, edged with something that might have been hysteria or terror or both. Of course, he said, voice cracking. Of course this is happening. He looked around at his friends, at the crowd, at the security guards. A homeless child is going to be right. A street rat with a medical journal is going to save me. He turned back to Aaliyah, eyes bright with unshed tears. Smile twisting his face into something ugly. Fine, do it. Touch my legs with your magical pressure point. His voice rose, sharp and brittle. And when it doesn't work, when the ambulance comes and real doctors tell us you're insane, I will personally make sure you never see daylight outside a psychiatric facility again. The businessman with gold rings put a hand on Whitmore's shoulder. Charles, maybe we should wait for. No. Whitmore's laugh cut him off. I want to watch her fail. I want everyone here to see exactly what happens when a delusional child plays doctor. He spread his arms wide, still gripping the wheelchair armrests. Go ahead, girl. You have 60 seconds. Aaliyah stepped forward. Can a 10-year-old with nothing but knowledge from a discarded journal really heal a paralyzed millionaire? Or is she about to prove Charles Whitmore right and lose her freedom forever? Subscribe now to see what happens when Aaliyah touches his legs and whether she walks away a hero or in handcuffs. Charles Whitmore leaned forward in his wheelchair, one trembling hand leaving the armrest to point directly at Aaliyah's face. His friends shifted closer, sensing blood in the water. The businessman with gold rings grinned. The one with silver cufflinks raised his phone, camera already recording. The thick-necked one crossed his arms, smirking. They were feeding off this moment, tasting it. You hear this? Whitmore's voice boomed across the rooftop, loud enough that conversations at distant tables stopped mid-sentence. A barefoot kid, a homeless child who probably can't even spell neurological, thinks she's a doctor. Scattered, nervous laughter from the crowd. Some people looked away, uncomfortable. Others leaned in closer, phones out, capturing everything. The woman in pearls whispered something to her companion. A waiter stood frozen with a tray of desserts balanced on one palm. Whitmore's eyes never left Aaliyah. They glittered under the string lights, bright and feverish and cruel. So let me ask you something, doctor. He practically spat the word. This miracle healing of yours, this magical pressure point that's going to fix 12 years of paralysis. How long is it going to take? Aaliyah stood perfectly still. Her bare feet had gone numb on the cold stone. Her hands were shaking inside the too long sleeves of her jacket, but she kept them hidden, kept her chin up, kept her eyes locked on his. She swallowed hard. Her voice came out quieter than she wanted. Seconds. For one heartbeat, the rooftop was silent. Then the laughter exploded. It started with the businessman with gold rings, a sharp bark of disbelief. Then the thick-necked one joined in, slapping his knee. Then the whole table erupted. Then the nearby tables caught it like wildfire, spreading across the patio in waves of shocked, delighted mockery. Seconds, someone howled. Did she just say seconds? Oh my God, this is incredible. Is someone recording this? Whitmore threw his head back, laughing so hard his shoulders shook. Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. His whole body convulsed with it, except his legs, which hung motionless and dead. Seconds, he gasped between laughs. Not minutes, not hours, not years of physical therapy and experimental surgery. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Just seconds of this child touching my legs, and I'll be healed. The businessman with silver cufflinks was doubled over, phone still raised, capturing every moment. Charles, I can't. I'm crying. Please stop, the thick-necked one wheezed. My chest hurts. But Whitmore wasn't laughing anymore. His face went suddenly still. Cold. The smile stayed on his lips, but his eyes went flat and hard as stone. He reached into the inner pocket of his navy suit jacket. The movement slow, theatrical, deliberate, and pulled out a leather checkbook. Italian leather, monogrammed with gold initials, CW. The laughter died down to nervous giggles, then silence. Whitmore placed the checkbook on the table with a sharp crack that made Aaliyah flinch. He pulled a pen from his breast pocket, Monte Blanc Platinum tip, and clicked it open. Fine, he said softly. Dangerously. Let's make this interesting. He bent over the checkbook, pen poised. The scratch of ink on paper carried across the silent rooftop. 50 people holding their breath. I'm going to write you a check right now. His voice was smooth, controlled, theatrical. Every word enunciated perfectly. For $2 million. Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. Holy shit, did he just say $2 million? Whitmore kept writing, bold strokes, numbers and letters flowing across the check. He didn't look up. If you heal me, if I stand up and walk in your magical seconds, this money is yours. He paused, pen hovering. You can crawl out of whatever cardboard box you're sleeping in. Buy yourself some shoes. Maybe even a bath. Ugly laughter from his table. The businessman with gold rings nodded approvingly. Whitmore finished writing with a flourish, signed his name at the bottom, all loops and confidence, then tore the check from the book with a theatrical rip. He held it up. The paper caught the string lights, the number visible to everyone close enough to see. $2 million. More gasps. Phones rising everywhere now, camera flashes popping. The woman in pearls had both hands over her mouth. $2 million, Whitmore repeated, waving the check slowly. Life-changing money. More than you'd see in 10 lifetimes of digging through my garbage. He lowered the check, and his smile disappeared completely. His voice dropped to something cold and venomous. But when you fail, and you will fail, because you're a delusional child playing pretend with information you can't possibly understand. The police are taking you away. Aaliyah's hands tightened into fists inside her sleeves. Trespassing, Whitmore continued, ticking off on his fingers. Criminal harassment. Attempted fraud. Practicing medicine without a license. That's a felony, by the way. And if you touch me wrong, if you hurt me in any way. His eyes glittered. That's assault. Possibly attempted murder if my condition worsens. The security guards shifted, hands moving to their radios. My lawyers will make sure you disappear into the system so deep they'll forget you ever existed. Whitmore leaned forward, wheelchair creaking. Foster care, juvenile detention, psychiatric evaluation. By the time they're done with you, you'll wish you'd stayed in your gutter. The rooftop was so quiet Aaliyah could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Could hear the distant traffic 6 stories below. Could hear someone's phone buzzing, ignored. Whitmore held out the check, dangling it between 2 fingers like bait. So, his voice went soft again. Gentle, mocking. Does that sound fair, street rat? Aaliyah looked at the check. $2 million. More money than her mother had earned in her entire life. More money than existed in the shelter she'd slept in, the foster home she'd passed through, the emergency room where her mother died because no one would listen. She looked at the crowd. 50 faces watching her. Some excited, some horrified, some recording everything on their phones, already thinking about how viral this would go. She looked at the 4 businessmen smirking behind their champagne glasses. She looked at Charles Whitmore, paralyzed for 12 years, terrified and angry, hiding behind money and cruelty because it was the only power he had left. And she thought about her mother's voice. Baby, you've got a gift. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small. Aaliyah's voice came out steady, clear, unshaking. Okay. The crowd erupted in whispers and gasps. She said yes. Is she insane? Someone stop this. But Aaliyah was already moving forward. A circle formed instantly. The businessmen stood and backed up, giving space but staying close. Security guards created a perimeter. Diners from nearby tables abandoned their meals, pressing in to see. Someone, the waiter with the dessert tray, started counting out loud. 60 seconds. Starting now. The businessman with silver cufflinks held up his phone, still recording. 59. Aaliyah knelt beside Whitmore's wheelchair. Her bare knees touched cold stone. Her hands emerged from the oversized sleeves of her jacket. 58. She looked up at Whitmore one last time. His face was pale, sweating, eyes locked on hers with an expression that might have been terror or anticipation or both. 57. Aaliyah reached for his right leg, and the rooftop held its breath. Can a homeless girl really heal a paralyzed millionaire in under 60 seconds? Or is she about to lose everything? Her freedom, her future, and maybe her life? Subscribe now to see what happens when Aaliyah's hands touch Charles Whitmore's legs, and whether a discarded journal can really work miracles. Aaliyah knelt beside Charles Whitmore's wheelchair. The stone patio bit in her bare knees, cold and unforgiving. String lights cast her shadow long and thin across white tablecloth. 50 people formed a circle around them. Phones raised, breath held, counting down. 56. Aaliyah didn't look at the crowd, didn't acknowledge the cameras or the whispers or the businessman with gold rings saying, "This is insane," under his breath. She looked at Whitmore's right leg. Her hands emerged fully from the oversized sleeves now, small and dark against his expensive charcoal slacks. Her fingers didn't shake, didn't hesitate. They hovered 2 inches above his knee with surgical precision, like she could see through fabric and skin to the nerve bundles trapped beneath. 55. "Wait," Whitmore said suddenly, voice tight. "What are you?" Aaliyah's voice came out soft, clinical, the tone of someone reading an X-ray. Trigger point is 2 inches below the greater trochanter, posterior aspect, where the sciatic nerve passes through the piriformis muscle. Her fingers moved slightly, adjusting position. In your case, the spasm created a secondary compression point at the popliteal fossa, behind the knee, where the nerve splits into tibial and common peroneal branches. The laughter that had been rippling through the crowd died. Instantly. Completely. Like someone had flipped a switch. The businessman with silver cufflinks lowered his phone slightly, frowning. The woman in pearls leaned forward, eyes wide. Even the waiter stopped counting for a beat, mouth hanging open. 54. Someone else picked up, voice uncertain. Aaliyah's left hand pressed gently against the back of Whitmore's thigh, fingers splayed. Her right hand positioned behind his knee, thumb and forefinger forming a precise angle. The journal documented optimal pressure at 45 degrees, posterior to anterior, with sustained compression for 8 to 12 seconds. She looked up at Whitmore's terrified face. "This is going to hurt." "Wait," he started. She pressed. Charles Whitmore screamed. The sound tore out of him, raw, animal, shocking in its intensity. His whole body arched backwards, spine curving, head snapping back, so hard it cracked against the wheelchair's headrest. His hands flew up, clawing at the air. "Stop!" The thick-necked businessman lunged forward. "Don't touch her!" The security guard closest to them threw out an arm, blocking. "If she moves wrong now." 53. Someone shouted over the chaos. Whitmore's scream dissolved into gasping, choking sobs. Tears streaming down his face. Sweat soaking through his collar. His fingers gripped the wheelchair armrest so hard the carbon fiber creaked, threatening to crack. "Please," he gasped. "Please stop." But Aaliyah's hands didn't move. Steady, precise, locked in position. Her lips moved, whispering numbers under her breath. 1, 2, 3, 52. The crowd counted louder, drowning out her whispers. Whitmore's friends pressed closer, faces white with panic. "Someone stop this. She's hurting him. Where's that ambulance?" 51. Aaliyah's eyes stayed closed, concentration absolute. Her whispered count continued. 7. 50. The pressure from her hands never wavered. Small fingers digging into muscle and nerve with impossible precision. She could feel it under her palms, the twisted knot of tissue, the compressed nerve bundle, the trapped electrical signals trying desperately to fire and failing, dying in the compression like water against a dam. 9, she whispered. 49, the crowd roared. Whitmore had stopped screaming. His breath came in shallow, rapid gasps. His eyes rolled back, showing whites. The businessman with gold rings grabbed his shoulder, terrified he was losing consciousness. 10, Aaliyah breathed. 48, her right thumb shifted 1 millimeter, applied pressure from a different angle. And then, pop. The sound was soft, organic, like a knuckle cracking or a joint settling into place. Barely audible over the counting and the chaos. But Aaliyah felt it, felt the resistance give way, felt the trapped nerve bundle slip free from the compressed tissue, felt the electrical pathways suddenly flood open like a dam bursting. Charles Whitmore gasped. Not a scream this time. A sharp, shocked intake of breath. His eyes snapped open, pupils dilated, staring at nothing. 47. Wait, someone whispered. Wait, look. Whitmore's right foot moved. Just the toes at first. A tiny twitch. Then they curled. Flexed. Spread apart. Oh my God, the woman in pearls breathed. The counting faltered. 46. Whitmore's entire foot rotated. Ankle flexing. Heel lifting off the wheelchair footrest. Then his knee bent. His whole leg drew up, thigh muscles contracting, calf tensing, foot planting flat against the footrest with a solid thump that echoed across the suddenly silent rooftop. I can feel it, Whitmore whispered. His voice cracked. I can feel my leg. Aaliyah stood slowly, backing away, giving him space. Whitmore's hands moved to his thighs. Pressed down. Felt the muscle respond beneath his palms. His fingers traced down to his knee, his calf, his ankle. I can feel everything. Tears streamed freely now. 12 years, 12 years. He gripped the wheelchair armrests, pushed, and stood up. His legs trembled violently, knees threatening to buckle. But they held, bore his weight, kept him upright for the first time since a skiing accident in Aspen put him in a wheelchair at 49 years old. The rooftop erupted. Oh my God, he's standing. Did you see that? I got it on video. The businessman with silver cufflinks dropped his phone. It clattered to the stone, screen cracking, forgotten. He stood frozen, mouth open, tears on his face. The thick-necked one grabbed Whitmore's arm, steadying him, sobbing openly. Charles, you're standing. The woman in pearls was crying into her hands. The waiter dropped his tray, desserts exploding across the patio in a spray of cream and chocolate, and just stared. 50 phones captured everything. 50 voices shouted over each other. Security guards stood paralyzed, radios forgotten. Whitmore took one shaking step forward, then another. His legs barely cooperated. Each movement awkward, uncoordinated, like a newborn foal. But he was walking. Actual steps, actual weight bearing. 12 years of paralysis undone in less than 60 seconds. He made it 3 steps before his knees gave out. The businessman with gold rings caught him, lowering him carefully back into the wheelchair. But Whitmore was laughing now, deep, gasping, hysterical laughter mixed with sobs. I walked, he kept saying. Did you see? I walked. His friends surrounded him, all of them crying, all of them talking at once. And Aaliyah stood alone at the edge of the circle, bare feet on cold stone, oversized jacket hanging past her hands, watching the chaos she'd created. No one was looking at her anymore. No one was laughing. No one was calling her a street rat or threatening her with police. They'd forgotten she existed, until Charles Whitmore's head turned. His eyes found hers across the crowd, still crying, still laughing, but something else in his expression now. Fear. Not of his paralysis, not of his condition, of her, of what she'd just done with nothing but knowledge from a discarded journal and hands that had never been formally trained. He opened his mouth to speak, and Aaliyah turned and walked toward the fire escape. Wait, Whitmore's voice cracked. Wait, the check, the $2 million. But Aaliyah was already gone, disappeared into the darkness beyond the string lights like she'd never been there at all, leaving behind only shattered champagne glasses, broken desserts, and 50 witnesses to an impossible miracle. A homeless girl just healed a paralyzed millionaire and walked away from $2 million. Why? What happens when the video goes viral? And what will Charles Whitmore do when he realizes the girl who saved him has vanished? Subscribe now, because this story is just beginning. Charles Whitmore stood fully upright, not leaning, not supported, just standing on his own two legs for the first time in 12 years, staring down at them like they belonged to a stranger. The laughter was gone, the cruel smile, the theatrical mockery, all of it stripped away, leaving only a 61-year-old man trembling in an expensive suit, tears streaming down his face, looking at his own feet like he was witnessing a resurrection. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "I can feel them." His friends still surrounded him. The businessman with gold rings gripping his elbow, the thick-necked one hovering close in case he fell. But they'd gone quiet too. Everyone had gone quiet. 50 people stood frozen in a circle, phones still recording, but no one speaking, no one moving. The entire rooftop holding its breath. Whitmore lifted his right foot, set it down, lifted his left. The movements were shaky, uncoordinated, but they were his movements. His muscles responding to his brain, his nerves firing, his body listening. "I can feel the stone," he whispered. "I can feel the cold. I can feel." His voice broke. "Everything." The businessman with silver cufflinks grabbed the checkbook from the table where Whitmore had left it. His hand shook as he thrust it toward Aaliyah. The check for $2 million still attached, ink barely dry. "Here," he said urgently. "Take it. You earned this." Aaliyah stood at the edge of the circle, 10 feet away, small and still in her oversized jacket, bare feet, torn jeans. She looked at the check, and she stepped backward, shook her head. "No." The word fell like a stone into water. Whitmore's head snapped up, eyes finding hers. "What? I didn't do it for money." Aaliyah's voice was quiet but steady, clear enough to carry across the silent rooftop. The businessman with silver cufflinks stared at her like she'd spoken in another language. "It's $2 million. I know." Aaliyah took another step back. "I don't want it." "Then why?" Whitmore's voice cracked. He took one shaking step toward her, legs barely holding him. "Why did you help me?" Aaliyah's hands clenched into fists inside her sleeves. Her jaw tightened. For a moment, she looked like she might turn and run again. Then she spoke. "My mom died because no one listened." The rooftop went impossibly more silent. Even the distant traffic noise seemed to fade. 3 years ago, Aaliyah continued, voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. February 9th, 11:47 p.m., County General Emergency Room. My mom kept saying she couldn't breathe, that her chest hurt, that something was wrong. Her voice didn't shake. She recited it like facts from a journal article. Clinical. Precise. The only way she could get through it. The triage nurse said it was anxiety. Told her to sit down and wait. She waited 43 minutes. She told 3 different staff members she couldn't breathe. No one listened. The woman in pearls had both hands over her mouth, tears streaming. By the time they took her back, she was unconscious. Pulmonary embolism. Blood clot in her lung. The doctor said there was nothing they could do. That it was too late. Aaliyah's voice finally cracked. But it wasn't. I read the protocols later. In the journals I found at the library. If they'd listened, if they'd done a D-dimer test in the first 15 minutes, she would have lived. The treatment was simple, but they didn't listen. Because she was black. Because she was poor. Because people like her don't matter to people like. She stopped. Looked directly at Whitmore. "People like you." Whitmore's face crumbled. "I didn't help you for money," Aaliyah said quietly. "I helped you because I could. Because I had knowledge and you needed it. Because no one should suffer when the answer is right there, available, simple, if someone would just listen." She wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve. "That's what my mom taught me. You help people when you can. Even when they don't deserve it. Even when they're cruel. Even when they call you names and threaten you and treat you like you're nothing." The thick-necked businessman was openly crying now. The one with gold rings had sat down heavily in a chair, head in his hands. And then someone moved through the crowd. A man in his 50s, gray beard, glasses, navy blazer. He'd been sitting 3 tables away with his wife, watching everything. Now he approached slowly, carefully, like approaching something sacred. He knelt beside Aaliyah, not in front of her, beside her, at her level. "That was textbook," he said softly. Aaliyah looked at him, startled. The positioning, the pressure point, the timing. He smiled gently. "I'm Dr. Marcus Webb, orthopedic surgeon, 26 years. I performed over 3,000 procedures." He gestured toward Whitmore, still standing shakily, still staring at his own legs. "What you just did, I've seen maybe 5 surgeons in my entire career who could execute that technique with that level of precision. And you did it from a journal article. At 10 years old, in under 60 seconds. He held out his hand to her. That wasn't luck. That was extraordinary. Aaliyah stared at his hand, then took it. Her small fingers disappeared in his grip. Dr. Webb stood, helping her up, then turned to face the crowd. Everyone here just witnessed something remarkable. Not just the healing, though that was astonishing, but the knowledge. This child demonstrated clinical understanding that most medical students don't achieve until their 3rd year of training. He looked around at the 50 faces, at the phones still recording, at the businessmen who'd been laughing minutes ago. She deserves respect. Not money, not charity. Respect. The authority shift was instantaneous. Visible. People who'd been smirking now looked ashamed. The waiter who'd been counting down stood with his head bowed. The businessman with silver cufflinks carefully set the checkbook back on the table, fingers trembling. And Charles Whitmore, paralyzed millionaire, real estate developer, man who called a child a street rat and threatened her with arrest, looked smaller now. His expensive suit hung differently. His confident posture was gone. He stood there on trembling legs, crying openly, looking at this barefoot girl who'd saved him despite everything he'd said, everything he'd done. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Aaliyah didn't respond, just stood there beside Dr. Webb, exhausted and small, and somehow still dignified. Whitmore took another shaking step forward, nearly fell. The businessman with gold rings caught his arm. "Please," Whitmore said, voice breaking. "Please let me. I need to make this right. The check, or anything. Education. Medical school. I can fund. You can start," Aaliyah interrupted quietly, "by listening to people. All people. Even the ones who don't look like you. Even the ones who can't afford your restaurants." She turned toward the fire escape. "Wait," Whitmore called. "Please, at least tell me your name." Aaliyah paused, looked back over her shoulder. "It's Aaliyah. Aaliyah Brooks." Then she walked away. This time, no one tried to stop her. The crowd parted like water, creating a path. Dr. Webb nodded to her as she passed. The woman in pearls whispered, "Thank you," through her tears. And Aaliyah Brooks, 10 years old, homeless, barefoot, carrying nothing but knowledge from discarded journals and the memory of her mother's voice, disappeared into the darkness beyond the string lights. Behind her, Charles Whitmore collapsed back into his wheelchair, sobbing. Not from pain, from shame. Aaliyah walked away from $2 million, but the story doesn't end here. What happens when a video goes viral? When every news station wants to find her? When Charles Whitmore dedicates his fortune to hunting down the girl who saved him? Subscribe now, because Aaliyah's life is about to change forever, whether she wants it to or not. The video hit the internet at 10:23 p.m., posted by the businessman with silver cufflinks, the one who'd been recording everything. Shaky footage, vertical frame, audio distorted from wind and crowd noise. But clear enough, crystal clear. A barefoot black girl kneeling beside a wheelchair. 50 people counting down. A man screaming, then standing, then walking, then crying. The caption was simple. "I just watched a homeless child heal a paralyzed man in 60 seconds. No one will believe this." By midnight, it had 40,000 views. By 12:47 a.m., when Aaliyah finally made it back to the overpass where she'd been sleeping, cardboard mat, donated blanket, backpack containing everything she owned, the video had 2.3 million views. She didn't know. Had no phone, no internet, no way of knowing that her face was spreading across the world like wildfire. She just curled up on her cardboard, pulled the thin blanket over her shoulders, and tried to sleep despite the cold and the hunger and the exhaustion that made her bones ache. She dreamed of her mother. 6 days later, Charles Whitmore found her on Thursday. Not personally. He sent Dr. Marcus Webb, the orthopedic surgeon, from the rooftop. Webb brought a social worker, a family attorney, and a representative from Child Protective Services. They found Aaliyah in the public library on 5th Street, reading medical journals in the reference section like she did every afternoon when the librarians let her stay warm. Webb knelt beside her chair. Same gentle approach as on the rooftop. Same respectful tone. "Aaliyah Brooks, we've been looking for you." She tried to run, made it halfway to the exit before the social worker, a kind woman named Patricia Chun, caught up and said the words that stopped Aaliyah cold. "We're not here to take you away. We're here to offer you a choice." The offer came in a conference room on the 42nd floor of Whitmore Tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Leather chairs. A mahogany table that probably cost more than most people's cars. Charles Whitmore sat at the head of the table. Not in his wheelchair, he was walking now, with a cane, physical therapy 3 times a week, motor function returning slowly but steadily. 12 years of atrophy couldn't be undone overnight. But he was walking. Because of her. He slid a folder across the table to Aaliyah. "Full scholarship," he said quietly. "Private schools starting immediately. Housing in a supervised residential program. Not foster care, something better. Medical care. Therapy if you want it. And when you're ready for college, full ride. Pre-med track. Any school you want." Aaliyah stared at the folder. Didn't touch it. "There's more," Whitmore continued. His voice was different now. Humbled. Careful. "I'm establishing a foundation. The Miranda Brooks Memorial Foundation." Aaliyah's head snapped up. "My mother's name." "Yes." Whitmore's eyes were wet. "The foundation will fund medical education for underserved communities. Emergency care reform. Implicit bias training for healthcare workers. Everything that should have been in place to save your mother." He pushed the folder closer. "And when you're ready, when you finish your training, there will be a clinic. In her name. In the neighborhood where she died. Free care. No questions asked. Just listening." Aaliyah's hand shook as she finally opened the folder. Papers. Legal documents. Bank account information. School enrollment forms. A future. Printed on expensive paper. "Why?" she whispered. Whitmore looked down at his hands. At the wedding ring he still wore, even though his wife had left him years ago. At the age spots and wrinkles and the evidence of a life lived with privilege and power and cruelty he was only now beginning to understand. "Because you were right," he said softly. "About everything. About listening. About respect. About who matters." He looked up at her eyes. "I can't undo what I said. Can't undo what happened to your mother. But I can make sure it doesn't happen to others. If you'll let me." Aaliyah was 10 years old, alone in the world. Exhausted and hungry and so tired of being cold. She signed the papers. 7 years later, the Miranda Brooks Community Health Center opened on a Tuesday morning in October. 3 stories, modern glass and warm wood. Located exactly 4 blocks from County General Hospital. Close enough to coordinate care, far enough to be its own sanctuary. The lobby was bright and welcoming. Comfortable chairs. Magazines in 6 languages. A children's play area. And on every wall, in every exam room, in every office, the same sign. "Listen first." Staff wore it on badges. Doctors recited it like an oath. Nurses taught it to medical students who rotated through on training. Listen before diagnosing. Listen before judging. Listen like lives depend on it. Because they do. The clinic saw 200 patients in its first week. 800 in its first month. Within a year, it had expanded twice and was training physicians from across the country in trauma-informed care and implicit bias recognition. And Aaliyah Brooks, 17 years old now, pre-med student at Stanford with a full scholarship, internship lined up at Johns Hopkins, came back for the opening. She stood in the lobby, staring at her mother's name etched in bronze on the wall, and cried for the first time in years. Dr. Marcus Webb stood beside her, hand on her shoulder. "She'd be so proud," he said softly. "I know." Aaliyah wiped her eyes. "I just wish she could see it." "She can." Webb smiled. Every patient who walks through these doors gets heard because of her, because of what you learn from her. That's legacy. 11 years later, Dr. Aaliyah Brooks completed her residency in emergency medicine at Johns Hopkins at age 28. She returned to the Miranda Brooks Community Health Center as its chief medical director. The clinic had grown. 6 locations now across 3 cities. Training programs, research initiatives, a national model for equitable healthcare. And whenever someone asked about the night that changed her life, the viral video that had been viewed 847 million times, the rooftop miracle that launched a movement, Dr. Brooks always answered the same way. She'd pause, think of her mother's voice, of discarded journals in a recycling bin, of cold stone under bare feet and a man who'd called her a street rat, of knowledge that took seconds to apply but a lifetime to earn, of listening, really listening. Then she'd smile and say, it only took seconds, 60 seconds to heal a man's legs. But listen, really listen, and you can heal so much more. She'd gesture to the clinic around her, to the patients being seen, to the doctors being trained, to the listen first signs on every wall. My mother taught me that everyone deserves to be heard. That knowledge without compassion is useless. That you help people not because they deserve it, but because you can. She'd pause again, eyes distant. She was right. And now, because of one night, because of 60 seconds, thousands of people get the care she never received. They get heard. They get help. They get to live. Dr. Brooks would smile then, sad and proud and grateful all at once. My mom always said I had a gift. Turns out, she was right about that too. This story began with mockery and ended with legacy. With a girl who had nothing but knowledge and changed everything. With 60 seconds that rippled into decades of healing. But here's the truth. There are real Aaliyahs out there right now. Real children with extraordinary gifts being ignored because of where they come from. Real patients being dismissed because of how they look. Want to be part of the change? Subscribe to follow more stories that matter. Stories that challenge how we see the world. Stories that prove seconds of listening can change everything. Because sometimes, all it takes is 60 seconds to see someone as they truly are. And that changes the world. In memory of every patient who wasn't heard. In honor of every healer who listened anyway.